G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. We're back. I got the team together again for another broker Q&A. The feedback that we're getting is awesome. It's very clear that you're loving hearing from our broking team. We're very much close to the action and what's happening at a coalface level. And what I've asked everyone to do is come today prepared with maybe an article or something they're seeing that's fairly topical and on trend with some of the discussions that they're having with clients in our own portfolio. So I'm going to kick us off. Well, first of all, g'day everyone. How are we doing?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Doing great.
Very good, Aaron. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for being here. All righty. My article that I'm picked out is a headline called 10 Properties and Counting Meet Australia's Super Investors, which was something that came out last month's AFR. So the case study they've used is a property investor who started with her first purchase in 2020 and has since gone on to buy 9 more properties at a $10 million portfolio value. So that's 10 properties. Property portfolio is $10 million and is now being dubbed a super investor, given that she's cracked what I call the grass ceiling, which is my kind of take on the glass ceiling. And she is saying that she can comfortably get herself to 25 properties and then start to scale up. So my discussion here is, I mean, we all see heaps of clients with a potential that they can scale up. And we say, look, I think we kind of have bigger ambitions or bigger visions for our clients sometimes than they see for themselves, and we're like, hang on, don't sell yourself short. You can actually buy more properties than you think you're capable of. What I feel is they haven't got the team around them that has that same vision or doesn't have that same level of clarity about how to get it done. Keen for your thoughts.
I'd say, Aaron, with the clients that we speak with, there is a ferocity in their desire to build their investment property portfolio. And maybe it's that they share very similar values to ourselves. But often we're speaking to people that have 3, 4 properties and they're saying, how do I get the next one? How do I get the next one? And we know that they want to scale their property portfolios. And yeah, so I'll leave it with the team to chat some more.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So just, I guess, as a case study, when Aaron mentions the team around you, talking specifically, your broker, your accountant, your buyer's agent, specifically with investment properties. I had one client come to us with 3 properties, all with a major bank, said my previous broker said I'm maxed out, came to us, asked, if he is maxed out, just to get, a second opinion. Since then, in the last 2 months, he has purchased and got another pre-approval in by going to a non-major lender. We haven't even scraped the service of SMSFs yet, so we can definitely get into that 6 that that article was mentioning.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nate. And it's something that I think you need to really think about. If you have people around you telling you can't buy more or you can't even buy one, don't let other people's opinions of what they think you should be doing as an investor dictate what you actually do. You need to surround yourself by property-focused individuals, whether it's a buyer's agent, a mortgage broker, financial planner, and an accountant, and let them do the actual sums of what your capacity is. Because if you've got equity and you've got borrowing power, you can buy property.
Correct. I mean, they're the two silver bullets, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I think we see so many potential investors where they're sitting on absolute gold mines of equity and they're not putting that to work.
Well, you get like I said, the accountant who says, oh, don't worry about buying a property, or you won't be able to do it, or you won't be able to manage it. It's not reality.
Correct.
It's just someone else saying what they're probably scared to take the leap themselves.
And that's why I talk about projections, right? They're projecting their own insecurities. And how many times we get other brokers that are projecting their own insecurities? I had one client, their previous broker said, why would you pay a buyer's agent? I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, mate, if I hear that, or the other one I heard was a broker said to the client, don't pay mortgage insurance. I'm like, you need to take those 2 brokers and shoot them because they're bad for our industry. Don't pay a buyer's agent and don't pay mortgage insurance. Are you mad? Like, I can't understand. That's the stuff that gets a bee in my bonnet, talking about mortgage brokers in general. Like Nate gets one and the previous broker was capped. It's like, look, mate, if you can do first-home buyers and that's all you're capable of doing, then stick to first-home buyers and tell the investors, like, I can't handle you. I think brokers try to take on deals that they actually cannot do. And maybe sometimes we're guilty of it, but sometimes we stay in our lane going, look, mate, we can refer you to a specialist, and that's probably the best thing to do.
Exactly. Definitely. And I think that some brokers are good in that you'd know this, Bernadette, because we get a lot of business from clients who have brokers, but those brokers can't do self-managed super fund lending. I think it needs to get niched again. Like if your broker doesn't work with investors, sure, it's a residential property, but if they don't do investors and they might only do first-home buyers or refinances, it's probably time to get a second opinion.
Yeah. Well said. I mean, this article, again, everyone quotes, and I'm not sure I love it, but everyone quotes the ATO data that came out from 2020, 2021. And we've seen these, and I'll include this in our images with the podcast. So they talk about property investors, 1% get to 6 or more investment properties, for example, thereabouts. And I just feel like 10 properties is the new 6. And I'll break this down. So people are looking for a net passive income, call it circa $150,000. I'm going to look at you, Damien, the human calculator, and go, right, 6, divide that. So 6 investment properties times $500 a week, $3,000, times that by 52 weeks in the year, that's your 150.
156,000.
Yeah. But you need to get to net passive, which needs you to pay off the debt, right? Which is then when we talk about trying to scale the portfolio, say 8 or 9, to sell off 2 or 3, to then get your 6 that are left with that little debt that then gets you that actual passive income. And we might be talking, call it 6 to 7 years away, for example. So rents might increase over time, but the government's doing a pretty good job of capping rent growth also. So if you're not setting your sights on overshooting the market, say 10 properties, if you set yourself 6, you'll get to 6. But if someone comes along and challenges you going, get to 10, you'll get to 10. It's like you running your race on the weekend, mate. Someone said, do 5Ks and you ran 11Ks, right? You're capable of running 5, but actually put you in the ring on the Saturday and you're actually capable of doing 11Ks at a certain time frame.
I think that we're always capable of more. I think that is generally a rule for everything in life. I think that looking at that super investor up to 10 properties, I think is like the article we mentioned, she's done it within 4 years.
Totally.
That's inspirational. It's not for everyone, that level of growth, but I don't see why 10 properties shouldn't be attainable over a 30-year investing cycle. Because if you think about the way I'm conceptualizing investing at the moment, think about it as you've got 3 10-year blocks to buy, hold, sell off maybe what's not performing, lower your debt, and go again. So to come out of retirement, if you started from the age of 30 to 60 and you invested over in 3 10-year blocks, you should be aiming for 10 properties. You'll have market growth, rental growth, income growth, debt stabilizing, getting paid down on the back of equity returns. Maybe not 10 in 4 years, but at least 10 in 30, or at least 10 by the time you retire.
Oh, great. Well said. Well said. Cool. I'm going to whip around. Nate, you've got your next headline.
Yeah, so the next article touches on the median house price in Sydney, or property price, in the last financial year has increased by $120,000. So I guess this is more of a numbers one. The average salary, I believe I read about a month ago, is now the median maybe $100K per year. Can anyone correct me on that? I think maybe a bit. Maybe in Sydney anyway, we're talking around 100K, right? So at 100K increase in the last financial year, that's $2,300 per week that the median property has increased. That's if you're paying a 20% deposit on your house, you need to be saving $460 a week to meet that 20% deposit. Now, obviously that's not taking into account if you've got a guarantor or you're going on the first home buyers scheme. But as a general rule, we're not saving that quick at the moment, are we?
We're not saving that quick. Rents are going up a lot higher as well, which are taking more from our net pay. Cost of living as well, generally speaking, is also on the rise. So we've got a couple of things working against us that we have no control over. On top of this as well, it's not looking too good.
Yeah, I feel first-time buyers. I know predominantly speak to a lot of investors on this podcast, but for first-time buyers trying to get into the market, I just feel for them. And the horse has bolted. Like we thought 13 rate rises might stem house price growth. It hasn't. We thought some of the changes that may come through lending, the talk of more rate rises, that hasn't slowed down. I heard Tom Panos recently talk about this spring they're expecting more sales listings to come on, like they're hearing more agents sign up agreements. So that's going to be great for the pipeline. And Damien, you mentioned that there's just not enough supply. Like the scope that we do when we search for properties in clients' price ranges, and we're just not coming out with like a lot of new listings or quality stock. It's like this is just it's pointing to just more increased house prices, and that median just keeps nudging upwards. I mean, Brisbane now topping Melbourne for a median highest house price across the country. It's not looking good for first home buyers, and it's like you got to do anything you can to get into the market right now, because that property's outpacing your ability to save week on week.
I think that's so true. I think you've got to get into the market one way or another. And if it's like the Sydney market has bolted for the average person who doesn't have a fairly large income or some support,
Bank of mum and dad,
dad, a parental guarantor. Look, the government's first home guarantee product is great. That's capped at 9. What does that get you in Sydney? Let's be very honest. Like, it doesn't get you where you need to be, especially with the age of a first home buyer now being 35?
We had a 36, 37.
36. Yeah. I mean, you're not looking for a 1-bedroom apartment at that age. You've probably got a partner and a kid. You're looking to get something to settle into.
Yeah.
So the Sydney market has bolted, but it doesn't mean you need to sit there and throw up your hands and say, these stats are crazy, I can't save $400 a week. It means that you need to go and look for another type of asset to buy in another another area. You need to be in a property market, no doubt about it. Being in it somewhere, whether it's in Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, generally speaking, is going to be more beneficial. Well, it will be beneficial than just throwing up your hands and saying, I can't do it.
Yes, I mean, you really endorse that investor model. Then at that point, if you can't get into the Sydney market, then you've got to find ways to get into the property market in general.
I think I think we're going to hear a lot more louder voices around that over the next coming years, especially people like Nate, who's in his sort of mid-20s.
Yeah,
your class of peers.
Yeah,
they're all bolting off to Europe. Yeah, they're enjoying their life. They're going to come back in 2 or 3 years and go, well, where do I go to from here? Like, what is left for me in a market that just keeps on increasing? Like, you can't live around your parents if you want to buy, depending on the area you're at. You've got to get creative with where and how you're going to enter in. So it's going to become more of a conversation around, rent vesting and using one of those 10-year blocks that I was talking about before to build an asset portfolio to sell off and then enter into your desired owner-occupied market. That's a 10-year block that you use to go and buy.
Yeah, nicely said. Nicely said. Cool. Damien, what's your headline you're looking at?
So I'm looking at, and I love this one actually, because it's ANZ Chief Shane Elliott's come out and said the regulators are locking out Middle Australia from lending. So with all the rate rises that we've had over the last 2 years, borrowing power has dramatically come down. We've seen a consistent assessment rate in lending at 3% on top of the buffer. So during the low rate times, we were assessing people at 5 to 6%. That's now your rate. And we're now assessing you at 9 to 10%, meaning your borrowing power is going to come down by quite a bit. I think we've seen it come down by at least 2 times your income. Yeah, that's what we've seen across the board. So I think this is a good one. It highlights something that, I like to correct in my clients. They always come to me and say, are the banks lending? And you probably get that a lot. Yeah. Are the banks open for business? Are they lending? They were never not lending. That's how they earn their money. The more money they give to people,
mortgage is the most profitable product for a bank.
The more money they earn. Regulators make sure the responsible lending's in place so they don't go out of control.
Yeah.
I think, however, in a time like to where we're at right now, where rates are probably peaking, they're talking about maybe 1 or 2 increases from here, but relatively peaking. Is a 3% assessment buffer actually serving borrowers and helping the responsible lending policy? Or is it now restricting people from getting into the market? And it's talking about Middle Australia here.
Yeah,
Are we now stopping people from borrowing and entering into a market by being too conservative?
And this is it. I think we reflect back on where borrowing capacities were like 3 or 4 years ago, and now when we started the business 8 years ago, and what got factored into borrowing capacity then, banks didn't care about HEX. Banks didn't care about strata. Banks didn't care about health insurance. Banks didn't care about your credit card, for example. Now, since the introduction of that, all that's done is just chip away at people's borrowing capacities. And I'm like, the longer you wait, the worse it's getting for your borrowing capacity. And like they'll find the next, tech tool that's going to actually tell them what your living expenses or your true living expenses are. If you sit above what they call the hem or the benchmark, then you might actually get flagged for that too. And I just feel like right now your borrowing capacity is the strongest it will be. I talk about, life stages for people. I literally spoke to a client yesterday talking about, having a second baby. I'm like, the second you do that, just know that $60,000 it's taken off your borrowing capacity for bringing this beautiful bundle of joy into the world. But just know that you're in the hole for 60 grand and someone's income has dropped, given that one partner is now going to a caretaking mode. So extra liability with a child, less income. You got to think about buying now before the second child comes on. So don't worry about the repayments. You'll find a way to make the repayments work without, I don't want to sound irresponsible, but I'm like, this is your best borrowing capacity unless your income goes dramatically up while your partner's at home taking care of this baby.
Yeah, and it's also the restriction of like the banks you can go to when someone goes on maternity leave. There's definitely policies in place. If you do go on maternity leave, we can use your return to work income. That's what the policy is. So while you're not earning an income, as long as you're coming from a full-time or part-time position, your employer can write a letter confirming so-and-so returns to work on X date at X income, and we can use that income. You don't need to be earning it. But you do restrict the banks that actually have that policy. All the big banks do, but the big banks isn't where you get your borrowing power. The non-banks, however, don't have as good of policies in the return to work space. So, there's a lot of it's not being irresponsible, but it is to say, if the cost of, the restriction to capital continues and we keep, restricting how much people can lend, and we keep being more, while it's good to be thorough with how we expense people's position, but if we keep going along the road where we're going now, where everything is taken into account, over time, your ability to borrow is just going to get less and less.
Correct. And the only winners here really, and this is why they talk about middle Australia, the only winners here really become the higher income earners.
Big time.
Yeah. And so people that can really kind of dial up their income, just their income, either it's business owners, higher paid employees, you're talking execs, you're talking about salespeople, bonuses, for example, working more hours isn't actually going to ramp up that borrowing capacity.
No, it's really tough to say this to some people, especially in some markets, but unless you can see Joe Hockey copped a bit of grief. Joe, don't know if you remember this, Aaron, many years ago when he said, why don't people just earn more?
Yeah, I remember that.
There is some truth to that in some markets. It's unfortunate. If you don't earn enough, you just won't be able to get into that market.
Yeah.
It's like we're really getting to that position.
I think that income becomes the filter for certain markets like a Sydney or even to a Brisbane to a certain degree.
It does, but we do have to be careful. And I think the New South Wales government has recognised this, that you do need teachers and you do need people that,
essential workers.
And essential workers, their incomes are capped as per their EBAs or their industrial agreements. And New South Wales government's recognise this, and they're going to be looking at having mandated housing for those types of essential workers, which is good. So I'm excited to see where those conversations go, because if we lose those essential workers in our economies, there's no one left to do the work that we need.
Absolutely. That's why you got to bring. That's why they're bringing migrants in, mate, to try and fill some of these gaps for employment.
And just one quick example, I spoke to a husband and wife couple, both teachers living in Parramatta area, and I said to them, "Hey guys, what are you looking to do?" And they're like, "Well, we really want a home. We want to start a family. We want a home. We're looking to go interstate, go to Queensland because we can get that home." And if you lose too many of those people, those occupations, those qualified people, it's very dangerous for economies.
Yeah. Speaking of, the article you're bringing to the table this week is all around housing affordability and the supply side of it as well, right?
Yeah, so it's from Property Council of Australia, and what role can prefab homes play into the housing crisis? So prefab, we also sort of mentioned tiny homes as well.
So prefab's like modular,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Everyone's unsure.
Modular, it's built in a warehouse or factory off-site and can be transported to your land or your location, either as one whole constructed piece or in pieces. And it's talking about, does this need to become a bigger percentage of what drives construction?
I mean, this is the antithesis to like the supply side is the issues that we've got in the construction industry. And for those listening, I mean, obviously we do a lot of people that are going through construction at the moment. I mean, we're doing our fit out at the moment. I think there's two things that are guaranteed. One is over budget and over time when it comes to construction. So if there's a way to kind of cap the costs, which is a prefab home at a certain dollar value, awesome. And these can probably be done in a production line, which means they can get really, really efficient with supply. So,
yeah. And we spoke about, Damien and I spoke about just before, the productivity when you're rain delayed or weather delayed. If you're building a home in a warehouse, those things don't matter.
Yeah.
You've got a roof over. You can work like a production line.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you've seen a job site on a Friday afternoon, but those traders are knocking off early. No offense, traders. There's no doubt about it. But you're right. It's all about how can we increase the supply? How can we be more productive? Because, all the reports come out, New South Wales government, the federal government, all our housing targets, they've come out already and said we're behind. I think they released a report a week later. They're like, we won't meet this report. We won't meet these targets.
Well, I was just saying it's $250,000, so $250,000 properties that we're short on for the federal government's housing supply. And they've said, yeah, we're behind.
Yep. So it's all about and I mean, the RBA's talked about it. We need to increase productivity. If we don't have productivity, we have inflation through wage growth. So the modular, I really think that this is something we need to invest more money. I think it said there's maybe 10 million going into it. I think invest more. I think if we can get the property built before it's even on the site, it means we can put it up a lot quicker. And if we can cut build times, we can increase the supply. And I mean, that's just going to be beneficial. I mean, they're talking a lot of them, the Victorian government looking at using modular to build a lot of social housing. Yeah. Great. We're going to have a homelessness problem soon. I think we've already...
I mean, Victoria's got big problems with the CFMEU. I mean, you talk about like an industry in strife, right? Like this is almost... you hate to use the word disruption, but this might be something that could really maybe complement the building industry as opposed to compete with it.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. And I think we will have like Bernadette mentioned, we need people living in our cities and we need it to be affordable to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Now, I think Victoria and some other states are looking at rent controls. It doesn't help the mum and dad investor, but it does help, retain a level of livability in an area. But if we could move away from rent control and try to increase the supply of properties in certain areas to, allow people somewhere to live, I think that's going to be beneficial. And if it's through modular, well, we need something. I think that's
I mean, we're reading about tiny homes. I mean, these are ideas, but again, who's the market for it, right? A tiny home. We spoke about our family. I'm like, there's no way we'd live in I am the size of a tiny home. I think it could serve like a downsize, or it could serve a single, maybe a young couple, for example. But at some point, the sweet spot in the Australian property market is a 4-2-2, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage, for example, is the sweet spot in Australian real estate.
Well, maybe the tiny home, isn't for you, Aaron, but it's that downsizer. It's an alternative so we can release some of the 4-2-2s that are being inhabited by one person. Release them to the market, release them to the young families. The downsizer gets the tiny home.
Yeah.
But something I've often acknowledged is, and maybe this is a generation baby boomer, so and definitely not to insult anyone out there, but I think a baby boomer to downsize to an apartment, we've had this conversation, they don't want to. I think they see it as like it's a downgrade, a step backwards. Whereas for like, I think about my retirement, and hopefully Aaron and I, when we retire one day,
Very soon.
An apartment's very appealing. I could lock it up. I could go on my cruise. I could go on my European 2-3 month holiday and not have to worry about a house to maintain. So I think that's also possible. Is that a generational thing?
It's definitely generational, because you got to think of the boomers, even Gen X. You know, there was land in our suburbs still.
Yeah.
Yes, that's pretty much what it is. They were still buying blocks of land, building houses at an affordable rate of, you know, somewhere between 3 to 4 times your income.
Correct.
You know, up until the 90s, that's when it really started to take off and become really unaffordable. So, yeah, generationally, if you didn't have a house, like if you couldn't afford a house, you were affording an apartment. How poor did you have to be? You know, that's probably how they look at it. So now if you look back and, you know, tell them, hey, come into that apartment market, they don't see it as that.
The great Australian dream.
Yeah, they're like, no, where's my front and backyard? But the way I see it and you see it, Bernard, I think our generation does, it's a time save. Yeah. You don't have that lawn to mow. You've got strata looking after maintaining a building. Yeah. All you've got to do is vacuum your floor and clean your bathroom, and you're on your way. Yeah. Like, it is such a different way of looking at it. And as you get older, what do you really want from life? You probably want time so you can enjoy your retirement. Yeah. So I think if that movement happens in that generation, which I'm 33, so I'm not going to be a spokesperson for the boomers, but if there's anyone out there who would like to be, maybe that's the message we need to get across to them.
Well said. Well said. I like it. Thanks, gang. I want to say appreciate everyone kind of coming to the table with some ideas and thoughts. And to our listeners, I want to say thank you very much for the feedback. I know that you've really enjoyed hearing from the brokers in our team. Obviously a different flavour of what we're bringing. But I think by looking at what's going on, we keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on, effectively from a media, because that's generally what's feeding people's, what's going in from a news perspective and what's fueling the property market as well. As we look to the rest of the year, what we're hearing is spring is going to be a bumper spring with listings. Real estate expert, Tom Panel's coming out saying that they'll see a lot more listings coming out throughout spring, which I think is great for home buyers. I think upgraders are the ones that are really going to kind of be jumping on that as well. So competing, knowing who your competition is when you're buying, whether you're an investor, upgrader, first home buyer. I think it's doing your due diligence, doing your research and homework, but most importantly, getting organised as well. So that's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. We'll talk to you soon.